Hello. Here, let me switch to my face. Welcome to TGI Kubernetes episode 102. I am your host, Joe Beda, and I'm a principal engineer here at VMware. And for those not in the know, TGI Kubernetes is our weekly-ish live stream where me or one of the other folks on the team talks about what's new with Kubernetes, sit downs, plays with a project, goes deep on a subject, something like that. And so I'm excited to be doing it again here in the new year, episode 102. Got some folks. Let's see. So this episode here, just to set the stage, is going to be a twofer. So I was talking with some of the folks that we hired that work on Knative, some folks that I'd worked on before at Google, before VMware, and they were talking how much they love this tool KO. And I'm like, hey, should I do it on TGIK? And they're like, yeah, it takes about 5 minutes. And I think it's probably going to take a little bit longer than that. But I think looking at that and then my eye on a project that Brendan released a couple of weeks ago, I figured hopefully we can sort of speed through a couple of them and see what they're about, because they're both relatively small projects. So this should be fun. So I'd like to start off by saying hi to everybody. And, some of y'all were on the chat earlier and started saying hi. So, Mozaffar, hello. Rory from Scotland, good to see you again. Suresh, Lamati, always joining us. Christoph, let's see. So George is hanging out with us here. Duffy, I think, is hanging out a little bit. Martin from the Netherlands. Marcin from Krakow. What is Vernal? Vernel? I don't know. Gal from France. Steve, good to see you. Gustavo. And then Matt is one of the authors of Co, so he's hopefully going to be able to talk to us about it and tell me where I'm doing wrong. Frederico, good to see you. Good to see you. All right, so let's jump in and get started. Oh, no. This says Panic at the Kernel. Okay, so this is a T-shirt that Alice Goldfuss did. It's a play on sort of Panic at the Disco, but Panic at the Kernel. It's really silly. But I think let's see, Panic at the Kernel. I think like the proceeds. Yeah, here we go. Do you enjoy popular mid-2000s music as well as niche tech jokes? Yeah, so this is so all profits donated to women in Linux, so that's kind of fun. It's a fun t-shirt. All right. Oh, look, and you can get it on all sorts of colors. I could have done blue. There we go. So I encourage you all, go buy Alice's shirt. Okay. Still on face. Yes. So let me switch to the screen. So we may end up with, like, as I'm going through stuff, we may end up hitting some hiccups. It was a little bit of a rush to install upgrades for everything because I upgraded to Catalina. I'm working from home today because got to be here for the kids and stuff. My wife is off doing something. And then I got a new monitor and camera and all that stuff. So it's been a little bit of a trick to get everything up and working. But hopefully we won't hit too many snags here. So, okay, so, and Waleed, good to see you from Saudi. All right, so, I love, huge shout out to Duffy and George, who, I was in meetings all morning. They pull together these notes. We go through it. We're like, hey, what sort of interesting things are going on? So, a lot of fun to be able to do that stuff. Okay, so Kubernetes 1.18 is moving its way along. I believe that the mascot for this release is the capybara. And there will be stickers for those who are involved. And this is actually, like, if you want to get involved in the Kubernetes community and you help out with a release, they end up doing release-specific swag that you can only get when you're actually in there doing this stuff. So, like, some really cool stuff that I'm jealous because I don't have all the time to be able to work on this stuff these days. So, so a couple of things to look at is that there's this release notes site, which is just getting better and better every release, going through a whole bunch of the stuff that's happening here. Feedback on this is useful, but I think lots of really cool stuff coming in here, and this is a good way to sort of pull this out of GitHub and make it consumable. There's also a spreadsheet used for tracking sort of which of the KEPs and issues and stuff like that is going on. So you can see all the sort of larger features that are making their way in, what the status is. And so this is one of the tools that the release team uses to actually pull all this stuff together. Oh, what did I? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. So if you want to help out with the with taking notes and stuff, if you just go to it should be tgik.io/notes. That should, okay, if you put an HTTP in front of that, that should get you to this, redirect you to this, and you can crowdsource some notes if you want. Couple of things that Duffy called out that he likes about 1.18. These are some really cool stuff. So the first thing is server-side apply. And this is, for those who have ever looked under the covers, when you do kube control apply, it should be as easy as just slamming up some new sort of like YAML converted to JSON or whatever to the server and having the server interpret that. But it turns out that it's more complicated than that, because there ends up being ideally spec is spec and status is status. But one of the problems we have with Kubernetes is that there might be multiple things editing spec. So instances like you might have an autoscaler and a deployment, and then the autoscaler is mucking with the deployment, and then and then you want to push a new version, but you don't want to override the changes that the autoscaler has been making. And so those are some of the subtleties that apply actually helps to deal with. And that stuff was all implemented in a kind of heavyweight way in kube control. A lot of that logic is being rethought and moved to the server with the idea of having sort of different views, different versions of resources, so that you can actually do that merging in a more structured way on the server. And so this has been in progress for a long time, and it's making some. It was developed on a branch, and it's making some good forward progress of getting in. So that's really exciting. And then sidecar containers. So we've talked about sidecars a ton. And the reality is that Kubernetes, when you have a pod, it has a list of containers, and all of those containers are considered equal, which means that if for that pod to exit cleanly, all the containers have to exit cleanly. And that can be problematic when some of the containers are something like a sidecar running Envoy for a service mesh or what have you. Now you shut down your main workload, that Envoy is left running there because you have to bring down both of the containers. The idea with like calling out sidecar containers explicitly is the okay, one exception is the init containers, is what Scott's saying. But the idea with sidecars is that you can identify, here are the primary containers for my workload, and then the sidecars come along and they don't control the life cycle of the pod like they currently do when you have a sort of a set of equal containers. So it's exciting to see that stuff come along too. All right, so let's see, Sandeep from Poland, good to see you, and Ramesh, and we have Scott, who's one of our colleagues on the Knative team, also working with Co. So excited to see Scott and Matt along here. So you can click through and dig into some of the details on those if you want to. Those are some of the issues in the proposals going on. Okay, the CNCF accurate annual report. It's useful to think about sort of like what is all the stuff the CNCF does. I think this is a good summary of what they've done, how the community is growing, how there's engagement. There's always more to be improved here, but I think it's really useful to call out the work that is being done to bring these projects together and support the community through things like KubeCon, and making sure that KubeCon is evolving over time to be a forum both for users, for contributors, as we look to move from things really centered on Kubernetes to a wider set of projects. And it's great to see the annual report really go into a lot of detail there. So something you might want to check out. All right, so more stuff that's going on. So some interesting articles that Duffy and George pulled out. Toter Sebastian here talks about right-sizing Kafka clusters on top of Kubernetes. So this is the Bonsai Cloud folks. and they ended up writing their own operator for Kafka. There's also Strimzy, which is a CNCF sandbox project for doing this, and talking about sort of how do you actually allocate resources. And so interesting to see this stuff working in the context of Kubernetes. And for me, this is really, really exciting because we're essentially moving from, hey, look what I can do, to here's real world experience with respect to running this stuff in production. And so I love seeing more in-depth articles like this, even if I'm not a Kafka expert. It really is a good sign to me that we're starting to mature in terms of people using this stuff for more advanced use cases. Um, Here's more of a one-on-101 scenario blog post on rolling updates, rollbacks, multiple environments, essentially like a lot of the features with deploy, but how to actually route to those things with ingress, and how do you actually start viewing this from the point of view of having, dev, staging, production, multiple environments, super, super common. So that is an interesting, cool article there from Ernesto. Folks from Sysdig have an article here that goes into some of the details around requests and limits and how those work. So I did a TGIK on this quite a while ago, but it's great to see more more detail of folks playing around with this. Some really interesting, cool diagrams that actually show all this stuff breaks down. Very cool stuff there to see that coming from Sysdig. Other stuff, if you're using AWS EKS, they dropped the price of EKS from 20 cents an hour to 10 cents an hour, which is, I think, really interesting. It makes me think, like, have they changed how they're hosting the control plane for EKS in the background? And I wouldn't be surprised if they're figuring out how to use some of their lightweight VMs to be able to host this stuff for smaller clusters, and that enables them to do this price drop here. It's going to be interesting to see, as they add more features to EKS, whether they continue to keep that as a paid thing, or whether they just think, hey, you'll get enough with the usage of the VMs. Some cool app releases coming out here. I hadn't seen this until, I don't know if it was Duffy or George that pulled it up. KubeNav, and this would be something fun to play with. It's a mobile app for accessing and managing Kubernetes, which looks pretty cool. And it's open source, so you can come check it out. A long time ago, Sebastian Goessen did an iOS app for managing Kubernetes, and it kind of sort of fell by the wayside a while ago. So it's fun to actually see this stuff come up again. Questions about auth, but it looks really, really cool. And this stuff is using Ionic and NPM. So a little bit of overlap with Octant, which is our next thing here. Octant clearly isn't a mobile thing. So Octant version 0.12. Evan says there's a 0.12 release of Knative because it's 6 weeks since the last one. All right, Evan, if you want to put that in the notes. Evan is another colleague working on Knative stuff. So Octant's making its way forward, features being added. Wayne's driving the bus there now. Really great to see that. There's a release blog post, but I think for me the most interesting stuff is container exec. This idea that you can have an interactive way to sort of launch and debug and manage containers from within Octant. Super cool. And then a workload viewer, which is essentially an overall sort of at a glance the health of all of your different workloads. So very cool to see that stuff coming along. So there's the workload viewer, and all the folks that are helping out, and then also the here you can see, I can zoom in a little bit, the idea that you can have a shell running as part of Octant. One of the interesting things here, and I was thinking about this a while ago, is that we have this concept for developers called an integrated development environment, like an IDE. And those things really bring together all the tools, curated experience, make it super easy. What would a sort of integrated ops environment look like? What would it look like to take the application ops tools, move those together, make that be extensible, make it be something that you can own, make it be something that really focuses on an experience? And I think that might be something that Octant actually turns into over time. And so that's one of the things that I'm super excited about. All right, so there's that. And Nautilus. So this is something that I know that the Fusion folks had been working on this. I didn't know that they were so ready for close to announce it and go to release. So I haven't had a chance to play with this, but it looks super cool. Um, VMware Fusion is a product with a ton of history about bringing virtualization to the desktop. And it was really one of the products that VMware got started with. It's been fascinating to see, as virtualization has been mainstream, how Fusion has aged. It's sort of faded to the background. But I think looking at this in the context of the need to have a production-like environment on your desktop, that's where stuff like this comes in. So this is really great to see these folks taking Fusion with all of its history and finding a way to start mixing in containers and Kubernetes to create a really great developer focused environment. And I know that that team has some big plans here. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes next with this as this makes its way out of, I think it's in a tech preview state into release. So very cool stuff there. And then Kubernetes Knative 0.12 serving and eventing. I think the fun stuff is adding support for Contour. And I want to hear more about. I haven't heard about the TLS challenges. I need to corner Evan and get some details around that. Whether this actually does stuff instead of things like Cert Manager or uses Cert Manager, or how it compares to Cert Manager, because I think that there's definitely some overlap there. But I love seeing like the support for Contour. There's also support for Ambassador and Glue, and it's great to see. Okay, it uses Cert Manager is what Evan's saying. It's great to see Knative create that level of choice in terms of you need some more advanced routing than you get out of the box with Kubernetes. But not tying that to something like Istio is really, really cool. All right. Now, so that's sort of Kubernetes stuff. Now some more fun stuff here. Well, this isn't fun, but the Red Door in Seattle is closing. And this may not seem like a big deal, but this is very, very sad. This is like when we moved into the Fremont office, Fremont, Seattle. This was like essentially across the street. And so this became our bar. And I know you can see I'm getting ads for shoes here. I know that, Craig and I, whenever we had to do OKRs or reviews and stuff like that, we would soften the blow of sort of corporate hood by going and grabbing a beer. A lot of the times the teams would go there after work. And so this was really like, an extension of the Google office. It was kind of like a conference room for us. And so really, and they had this beautiful patio in the summer. So really sad. So we're going to probably try and throw some sort of goodbye event shindig there. Sad to see that happen. And then I was just complaining about with the upgrade to Catalina, they want you to switch to Z Shell, and George was pulling out this great guide that Justin Garrison did on Z Shell, which might get me to move over there, but I don't know. I'm kind of old and crusty, so I'm kind of with Duffy. Update on the episode 100 shirts. George is working on getting those out there. If you live outside the U.S., it may take a while, but he's going to make sure it happens. All right, so that's sort of news of the week or so. If anybody has any other things that they want to add. Oh, my Z Shell is pretty rad. Yeah, I know. I heard good things. I just feel like every time you mess with that, that's going to be like 2 or 3 days out of my life that I can't spare to do that stuff. So we'll see if I can find the time to make it happen. All right, so I was going to take these one by one. I think let's start with Co. Okay, we're going to start with Co. And Co is there's a blog article here that we're linking to. It's on the Knative blog that talks about Co. And it's really about streamlining the build and deploy aspects when using Go. And I think Go is special in this context because Go produces these static binaries. When you look at a Docker file for a Go project, it generally is like copy, build, which is have the Go toolchain, do a build, get a single file, copy it over to the runtime container, and then that runtime container ends up being a very thin wrapper around that static binary. In fact, if the entire world worked like Go and you were shipping static binaries like Google does, then we probably wouldn't need containers in the way that we need them now. And so that's something that I think we're definitely it's interesting when you look at something like Go in the context of containers. The whole container image thing feels oftentimes a little bit silly, but the idea here is that, yeah, generally you do a Go build, maybe in a Docker build, and then you do a push and apply, and you have to have your local Docker daemon and all that stuff. And if you have a bunch of microservices, then there's a lot of stuff that gets repeated, and then you wrap that with something like Scaffold. Yeah, Robert says 2 or 3 days out of my life. Yeah, I know. Every time I muck with like my, Emacs.emacs, that's definitely an afternoon. So the idea with Go is that you point it at something that's Go gettable, and it just makes it happen. And it handles both the build, the packaging of the container, and the uploading of that to a registry. And I think that ends up being super, super interesting. What you end up, so let's actually go ahead and we can try this out. So I think I have, beware some of these import paths changed. Okay, so let's see. Oh, it's before you had, okay, so that's before you had your own repo. Okay, so some of the instructions here are a little bit out of date because this was quite a while ago. So instead, what we'll do is we'll follow the instructions in the README for Co. As much as I like it, the SEO for Co is kind of crap. I got to be honest. All right, so we can do that. Yeah, it uses modules. That sticker, and the sticker is cool. Do you actually have prints of that sticker? That would be sweet. I have this sticker, and I'm going to try to figure out where did it go. Somebody gave me at one point a shrug sticker. Like here's the. And I'm trying to figure out where I want to put it. I think what I moved is from putting stickers on my laptop. I put them on my laptop stand because I feel like the laptop stand is going to last longer than the laptop. All right, cool. Okay, so yeah, paste it. I don't care. It's all a version 2. Magic is happening. This is bringing in a lot of dependencies, guys. Oh shit, it's bringing in client Go. Okay, sorry, this might take longer than I thought. All right, so the idea here, so while that's going on, let's see what happens here. So you can go through and you can do like a go get, and that essentially says download from GitHub or Git or whatever, um, uh, build it, and then throw it in a specific path. And so there's sort of a convention around Go where the place you can download and the name of the thing, all that stuff really just sort of lines up. And so Co really sort of plays on that. So the idea here is that because building a Go repo when it's Go gettable is so easy, all you can do is actually just say, have a repo. Instead of an image name here, you actually give it a path to the GitHub repo, and then it takes care of everything else around that, which is really, really interesting. And so we'll go ahead and we'll try that. Matt, does this example work? Is this actually a thing? Let's see if I can just run through this. GitHub.com. Matt Moore. Does that work? Kinda. Do we have any examples here, dude? You said that's gonna break for us, I think. Oh, you don't have that repo. Do we have a good example repo that we can use that's go gettable? Do we have to create one? That's a more in-depth project. All right, so you don't have that repo. All right, so yeah, Matt, if your links aren't showing up, just put them in the internal Slack, and we'll get them on there. YouTube gets rid of those things. Okay, so let's see how our install's going here. Okay, so we're installed. I can do co. Oh, phone's ringing. Shut up, phone. It's spam. Sorry. Okay, so GitHub Copond. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and learning how to use Co. Oh my goodness, Scott, why didn't you show this to me earlier? Okay, but there's no instructions. Feel like you're starting, but like what do I looking config? Okay. All right, I'm gonna do this. Okay. So, oh, this is old though. So this is old. Okay, but it should be go gettable. So let's actually check it out. So like the command that we're actually doing here is echo. So I should be able to do, if I do go get github.com slash what is your Scott Copond echo command. So that should work. Let's just test that out here. So there we go. Okay. Okay, so I can do git clone. Wait, what am I doing wrong? Okay. So now we go to config. Okay, so we have, oh. What the? How did I get that? That's an interesting thing. Oh, you know what? How did I do that? Okay, that's amazing. Okay. Oh, look at that. Ha, look at that. So I actually created and then when I did cuz oh, okay, wow. All right. I know what's going on there, but it's crazy. Okay. Let's see. So if we go to config here, do VS Code here. Okay. And let's see. Hopefully you didn't upgrade and break stuff too. Okay. So what we have here is we have like a namespace. Okay, there's a test in the co-repo also. Okay. So should I use the one in the co-repo then? Should I use the one in the co-repo? Or should I use the co-pond? Wait, we have this now. Okay, so let's just look at the configs here that we're about to apply here. So what we have here is we have a namespace, whatevs. We have a deployment. The interesting thing here is that the deployment, this is actually a GitHub link. This is not this is not actually an image, right? Because GitHub doesn't host images now, I think, right now. We need to, in the deployment here, we need to change that to v1. We'll fix that. This one's at v1. Core service is v1. Type equals load balancer. Sure, whatever. I'm using kind. And then we have a service account for whatever reason for the Echo controller. Okay. Long to standard. Okay, cool. All right, so and so what's going to happen here is if I just YOLO this in, so I can do, what is it, apply this. Oh, what do I got to do? What did I do? Docker repo environment variable is unset. Oh, I have to tell it where I actually want to. Okay, so it's going to create some containers. It needs to upload them, and you have to tell them where you want to stick the things. Let's see. Do we want to? And so you can stick that in up in a real repo like GCR or whatever, and then but I think. And you can specify the default base image and all that. But okay, so there's a way. Is there a way to do this with? I thought I saw this with Minikube. Okay, co.local. Does that work with kind? Does that work with kind? Do you think? What does co.local do? Is that something special? Okay, let's see how that works. Okay. Export. I'm only running one node with kind. Oh, what did I do? Oh, okay. So this is me screwing up my this was me mistyping some stuff earlier. This is fraught. And then I can do export cube config equals like that. Cube config. There we go. Cube control get pods. There we go. Nothing. Okay. And then I can do co-apply dot. Let's see. Okay. Oh, I have to do -f. Okay. Okay. So now, so the Google folks have this thing called Distroless, which is a super minimal base image, like not even like it has like a few things like placeholders in there. All right. And so what it did is it actually built some stuff. Is it putting it into co.local? Where is co.local? Is that okay? Selector error. What did we forget? Labels, metadata labels. I have to have a V1 requires a selector in the spec, or what is it? Is it like that? I think that's right. That's probably wrong. Let's see what happens. Oh, no field selector. Oh, okay. Oh, in the parent spec. Oh, I gotcha. Okay, yeah, my bad. This is the template. We want that. Is it match labels, or does that work? Oh, no. Okay. See, look at this. I don't even know what I'm doing. Selector.match labels. Is that like another... It's been a while since I've done this stuff. And this is why... so we'll get to this, in the... when we start looking at things like Configula. Boom! So that was actually really cool. So I can do Docker images ls images. And we can see that we have... It gives it a name with co.local and all that and latest and all that 50 years ago. I'll explain what's going on there, which is really fun. But that was, there was some voodoo, there was some magic going on there that was actually really cool. And so I think now if we do cube control and was it copond get pods? Oh, image pull back off. Okay, so Okay, so it's not getting into the parent one. Okay, so this is a problem with kind. So I think probably finding the right instructions to make this stuff work with kind would actually be worthwhile. See, local registry kind. Okay, so this thing, kind registry. Okay, this is something we'll have to do at some point. Okay, so this is kind load image name. Okay. Okay, yeah, because kind has its own daemon and this stuff. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do is we're going to and hopefully what we'll do is we'll bounce this off a Docker Hub because why not? I think probably this is something I think would be worthwhile. Getting co-working with kind would be great because kind is great because it's a multi-node thing. And let's see if this works. And so that workflow for development locally is actually going to probably be pretty big deal. Okay, so now I need to do Docker login, I think, because I haven't done that in a while, and I'm sure Joe Beda. Now this is the danger. This is the danger here. You all can't see this. All right. Actually, what I'm going to do is let's make sure. Okay, so the fascinating thing here, and I think this is which is okay, it didn't actually show anything. Phew. Okay, so this did a container image build, but it didn't use Docker, right? So I only had to do Docker login there so that I could actually sort of initialize all the credentialing stuff. This is not actually using Docker behind the scenes to do the build. So what usually happens with a build when you have a Docker file is that roughly each line of the Docker file says, start up a Docker container, run some command in that container, and then save the state of that file system and turn that into a layer in the image. And so that ends up being like the thing that happens. What Co does, and I think what we're seeing a new class of tools doing, where it can actually build Docker images without actually running sub containers to be able to do these things. And there's a couple advantages that. Number one, you can be really fast. Number two, you can be very thoughtful about what goes into each layer of your image. And then number three is that you don't need any privileges to be able to do this stuff. You can do this stuff, you can make it fast, you can do it locally, and you don't have to use Docker. And so the trade-off for Co is that Co works with Go. It doesn't provide a bunch of the sort of customization, sort of like open-ended run any command you want. But it's very focused on sort of like building a Go binary, getting it in a Docker container, and then you can decide which base container you want and all that stuff without bringing Docker into it. So last mile build is one of those things. Okay, so yeah, so it's not really Docker build. It's happening on my workstation. So let's actually go through and like make this. Okay, so now, so if it's Docker, the Docker repo would be Joe Beda, I think, right? Is that what we're doing here? So now, if I do co, is it co publish? No? Okay, I'll just do the apply again. Maybe that'll get it. Boom. Okay. So publish just builds the image. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so this thing actually went through. Okay, so now what's happening under the covers here? Let's dig in a little bit deeper. And there's essentially, when you do that apply, there's a couple of stages that actually come into play. Okay, so Waleed says, I like the OpenShift and Singularity way where the build is centralized for on-prem environments. However, you say there are no security privileges issues in here. Yeah, I think the idea that you have to have any sort of elevated privileges to build a container is really an accident of history of the way that Docker worked. And I think that, you know, as an industry, things work a lot better if you can actually create a build, create an artifact without having any elevated privileges. I mean, like, if I'm going to use my C++ compiler, I don't need root, right? Why do I need root to actually build a container image? Okay, so essentially what's happening here is that we're giving it a bunch of manifests. It's looking for certain patterns in here, like GitHub, like blah, blah, blah. It's then going through and actually now, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's like it looks in your Go path to see if you have this locally. It doesn't actually pull this thing down from GitHub out the gate. So I think it looks locally to be able to do this stuff. And then for each one of those things that are a command, it essentially builds an image on that thing and then uploads that to your registry. And then, so that's the publish, right? And then it'll actually go through and every place where it sees the that GitHub repo, it does a textual replacement with the name of the image. Okay, docker.io/Joe Beda. Okay, so that was it. All right, that worked too. I think it was already up there, so I think we were good. And now if I do cube control get pods, okay, yeah, we did an upgrade and it's terminating and we're all up and running. So that thing's up and running. Yeah, so it composes an image without having to actually run Docker to do that, because you're not starting up a Docker, because you're not sort of like doing file system diffs and all that stuff. It can move a whole lot faster. Okay, and so the SHA, this thing, it ended up creating a new image, but the SHA was the same. So this is another interesting thing, is that it's a totally reproducible build. And that's why, like, if we look at Docker images, we'll see that this thing says 50 years ago. And that's because they essentially set all of the Unix timestamps for all the files and everything to 0. Because when you're trying to build reproducible things where it's like, hey, I want to build something now, and then I want to build something 10 years from now, and I want to make sure I get the exact same bits, so I have to understand everything that goes into it. Any place where you see something like a timestamp in your binary or in your artifact, it actually creates changes that aren't really changes that hinder reproducibility. And so that's why we're seeing all the dates being wrong. And there's something in the README that actually goes into that stuff. So essentially what it does is it finds those GitHubs, it builds those images without using Docker, it pushes those to a registry, it rewrites the YAML, and then it applies the YAML. And so that's actually really cool. So how later do you do updates or rollbacks? Where are the image tags? And I think one of the interesting things here is that this is, and I'll let the guys on the chat help with this, but like this is really helpful for that development fast loop type of flow. When you're doing a release, you'll probably want to go through and give this thing tags and sort of long-term identity for this stuff. Or maybe I'm wrong. We can let these folks. Okay. So, okay. Yeah. Okay. Here's something else that's really interesting. Is if you if I do a co-resolve -f dot so it's going to build it, and what it actually does here is it you can see it replaced it with this thing here with the full SHA hash, right? And one of the interesting things that we actually see, and then is that any place where it sees that string, it'll do a build, it'll actually do the push on this stuff. And so this doesn't have to be in like a image colon blah tag. This could be an environment variable, or it could be a YAML file that's never uploaded to Kubernetes. And so you can use this to actually save the hash and stuff like that. And that's what Matt was talking about there. You can also add tags. Now, when I saw this, I was a little bit skeptical of the fact that like any string that looks like GitHub, and my understanding is that there's a strict mode and it's not well documented. And the strict mode, essentially, you have to go through and every place where you have one of these things, you have to give it a sort of like that. That essentially is a real sentinel saying, this is the thing that I want you to build and actually do it. So that if you're afraid of sort of accidental building of stuff as you're doing your processing, this will actually help with that also. So that is an interesting thing to see there. Oh yeah, okay, so that worked also. So here we are, right? So I like that. I like being explicit. That's just the way I roll. It's like I'd rather have things be explicit than implicit. And so that's pretty much co in a nutshell. I mean, there's probably a few options here and there. Oh, there's this co apply / watch, which essentially says anytime anything changes, reapply it. So this starts getting like, some of those inner loop automatic deploy types of stuff, which is really cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of like, let's actually not overload the image field in some weird ways. Oh, it doesn't work on Mac OS. There's there's like brew FS. No, there's a replacement FS. Oh, there's like this FS watch thing that has similar semantics that you could probably plumb in. Okay, cool. All right, Duffy's saying there's another web service out there, I can't recall the name, where you point the image string at a web service GitHub repo and we'll build the image just in time for you. Yeah, that'd be cool too. Okay, so cool. So that is Co. Super interesting. And I think it's as we start seeing container images being these things, like mixing and matching sort of the language tool chains, the building, the deployment stuff is actually really, really cool. Okay, but I do think we need to like get some instructions on how to, so advice for you guys, instructions on how to make this work with kind would be useful. And then having a sample that actually works versus pointing at the repo that, like, just having a tutorial going ABC, because these things don't work. Matt Moore doesn't actually have an examples repo. Contain.me. Serves Docker container images generated on demand at the time they are requested. So you can, okay, that looks really interesting. Docker pull co contain.me co serves an image. So this will actually do the co at the time when you pull it. I'm very confused by the whole thing. This is cute. I'm not sure you'd want to run this like having some random ass service hosted somewhere building the stuff that you run. This is a good way to get owned. This would not be what we call sort of a trusted build service. But it's a really cool idea. I love it. Similar things with build packs is really cool too. Yeah, build packs are another interesting area where they're viewing building the container image as a composable explicit thing versus this implicit thing with Docker files, which is cool. Yeah, nixery.dev or ctr.run. Okay, those sound interesting too. All right, cool. All right, so that's Co. That's about all there is to it. Hopefully y'all get a better idea of how it works. It kind of wraps kube control to some degree for some of this stuff. You can specify your base image. You can, there's ways to actually add some static assets and stuff like that in there. So some fun stuff going on there. Okay. Let's move to our next project in our twofer here, unless people have more questions about Co, which is Configula. So this is like the number of variations on how to solve this problem and the creativity applied to it is absolutely fascinating to me, because a while ago we have this I showed off this project called YTT, which is part of this suite of projects from a couple of folks, one at I believe IBM, and then one at Pivotal, Dimitri, who may be joining us or not. And YTT is interesting because it's a YAML templating approach where it kind of feels like PHP to some degree, where you have you can sort of wrap things uh, uh, with YAML, right? And so it's I mean, you have YAML, and then you can sort of embed Python into it. It's actually a variant, a subset of Python called Starlark, that, or I think it was Starlark, that was created during the Bazel project. Um, Mozeffer says, why Co is not fully integrated with Kubernetes? I was expecting to see something like Co get pod. Starlark. It was formerly Skylark. Yeah. So CoGet, I think, it's one of these things where it does a little bit of sort of re-implementing about kube control, but I think trying to totally wrap kube control, that'd be interesting to think about what that would look like. So it's only the apply create stuff that it does, and delete, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Um, so here, what you can do is you can go through and take YAML and then just like add a little bit of Python type stuff in there. But it's YAML first, augmented with Python, is YTD. And I think when we think about templating Python, this is generally the type of thing that I think about. I think there's some uh, uh, questions around sort of like, does it have to be valid Python, and I mean valid YAML, and it does, and you can. So there's some sort of structural awareness here. So it's not. I don't think YTT is pure textual. Um, but what's fascinating um, is that what Brendan did, and he took a page from the React world, is he said, okay, this thing is Python first and YAML second. So right now, one of the things that we find is that anytime when you want to embed something like even JSON, like the best case scenario is when you're embedding JSON in JavaScript, right? Because you can essentially just copy and paste it. But JSON's a pain in the ass to actually write because it's so persnickety about stuff. Um, but even doing something like JSON in Python ends up being a little bit complicated to be able to do that translation there. And so what Brendan did is he actually said, well, if you end up with, he augmented essentially a preprocessor for Python that goes through and provides a way to have sort of YAML literals inside of Python, where you can go through and you can actually go through and embed YAML directly into Python, and then actually call out with a special syntax back into Python. So you can switch back and forth to Python in a way where you can essentially just copy and paste your YAML in there, which is actually, I think, really, really cool. So the first thing let's do is let's install the darn thing. It's a Go utility that actually calls out to Python. And so Evan's saying, are the literals structured content or text? I believe the literals, that's a good question. He has a render thing here, so my guess is based on the render. That implies to me that it ends up being sort of maps and lists and sets and sort of like native Python things that you can continue to deal with. But that's something that we should totally dig into a little bit. Okay, getting started. Let's get the thing installed. Darwin. Oh, Brendan. He's not watching, so he can't. Scott saying it should have been Lua based and been Configula. I never learned Lua. I need to learn some Lua. Okay, there's the Darwin binary. So let's see. So this is the type of thing where streamlining the install of this. It'd be great if it were brew search configula. I don't think it. I think it probably doesn't work. Nope. Okay. So tar xzvf Downloads Configula, yeah. Okay, move Darwin Configula to bin. Okay, how do I do this? What do I do? This was a Catalina thing. It's essentially unsigned. That's not it. Okay, so I'm gonna have to look this up. One of y'all. Yeah, it was in system preferences. No, but there was some command line thing that you could do that said, yeah. Um, run downloaded binary Catalina. Let's see what happens there. But then if I go to security and privacy, yeah, that's well, no, I don't want to turn it off for everything. I just want to be able to like bless that binary. And this ends up being general. Okay, I can do allow anyway there, and that'll actually do it for once. I want to dig into this at some point, but now's not the time. Okay. Cool. Okay. So this essentially is a sort of a preprocessor that then shells out to Python, which is really interesting. And so let's do maker configula. So okay, so his examples here, we got this. Where's his getting started? Clone the Git repo, and then okay, and then we'll clone his thing. Wait, what the git clone. Okay. And so he said that the examples, CD examples. So let's look at what that looks like. We have tiny.py. Okay. Okay, that's lame. I don't want to do that one. YAML.py. Okay, so this is interesting. Okay. Okay, let's do this one. The namespace is .py. So if I go through here and if I do configula, no, not YAML.py. No module named runtime. I think I wish Brendan was here so that I could bug him about this. Okay, so this is something that is sort of runtime YAML that gets injected somehow. And so this is not getting in there. So this is the problem. Switch Python, user local bin Python. It doesn't like that Python, which is my homebrew Python. So let's go through and see if we can make this stuff work. Oh, it can be a kube control plugin too. Okay. I don't think it's because I moved it to a different place. let's see. So there's, let's see what happens there. Okay. From runtime import, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, so here you can see sort of how it expands it. So it takes that thing that's inline, and then it creates essentially a bunch of classes called YAML variable, YAML expression, all that stuff. That's in that runtime thing. The question here, and then it says render, and then it has a maybe render at the end, because I think that lets you sort of elide the render is what I'm guessing. And then, do I need to be at the get of the, I don't, maybe. So let's, the other thing I wanted to do is, oh wait, that was the wrong thing. Which Python, so let's try and sort of, okay, so if I do this, I should be able to do import. Okay, that's not it. Why can't that runtime.configula? No module named runtime.configula. How does Python? No module named YAML. Okay, so we're making progress. Okay, pip install YAML. Pip 3 install YAML. Grr. Yeah. I know this is the problem with like Python installs get so finicky, right? So brew Python TLS. Am I doing like, depends on cryptographic and that should work, right? Check package dir, brew update Python 3. I'm gonna regret this. Brew up 3. Okay. Check the package dir. Yeah. I had the command line tools installed. Sorry, all. Oh, I'm going to build Python while we sit here. Okay, but I think this gives you an idea here of what's happening, and I think this is actually fascinating. And so I'm not going to necessarily rebuild Python while we wait. But I think that this is really, really fascinating. So what he's doing under the covers here is that if we look at, package configula here, it's a pretty simple parser, I'm guessing. So there's a Python generator here, and it looks like he has some interfaces for being able to do different languages and stuff. Oh yeah, maybe a Docker image would be the way to go to actually demo this stuff off. But the idea here is that, it's nothing more than generating, looking through the lines, uh, and then, he has sort of an inner loop. I don't know, like where does he do? And then he puts the maybe render at the end here. But my guess, current section, sections. Oh, so he breaks it into sections. Okay, so this happens before that. Maybe there's like a simple parser. Yeah, okay, and a section is essentially data, the YAML that's in there. And so that's actually really cool. And so then so yeah, so I think it's a really really cool hack, and I love the sort of the being inspired by JSX. Because if you've used React, you can use React without JSX, uh, but it works a heck of a lot better if you do, because it lets you have your code and your data as sort of HTML stuff totally intertwined in a way that's actually scalable, because it's not like PHP, where PHP it's the HTML on the outside and PHP on the inside. Here it's Python in this case, but in JavaScript with JSX, it's the real language on the outside, but you're actually bringing the ideas around a special type of format on the inside. That thing gets pre-processed. It turns into a set of classes that you can then work with even further, which is really really cool. Um, the other thing that I think is interesting here, that I think is reminds me of, is if you are familiar with the .NET world, and maybe this is the Microsoft rubbing off on Brendan. There is the what is it called? Embedded SQL in C#, right? That's called no, it's not embedded SQL. It's called oh God. There was a name for this. It's not SQL, but it's a SQL link. Yeah, the link stuff. Yeah. So like C# link is fascinating in that now this actually goes a lot deeper, but they have sort of special syntax here that's extensible, that actually turns into sort of classes that get executed under the covers. um, Not exactly the same thing as this, but this idea of like we're going to be taking sort of these types of special types of syntaxes and being able to actually do interesting things with them that make them be a lot more approachable. And then what was it? It was oh God, in C++, God, believe it or not, you can have literal conversions, C++. I'm trying to remember user-defined literals. These things are fascinating. C++ like breaks my brain. But what you can actually do here is this is a modern C++ feature, where you can go through and have overrided operators where you can have like an underscore blah, and then you take a string or something like that, and then you can underscore that, and then it actually creates a whole, it essentially runs a special constructor with that string. And so you could do something similar built into C++ by putting YAML inside of a string, and then actually having like an underscore YAML to actually be able to do the parsing into some sort of object model, which would be really cool. I don't know if you could do the sort of back and forth that Brendan does, and that happens with a lot of React, which is essentially the re-escaping back into Python. That's something that I don't think is well supported in C++. But yeah, but I think LINQ is another example of where you actually see the blurring of these lines. And obviously in the functional language world, this is, very, very, very common. But I think seeing this mixed into imperative languages is really cool. So let's see. Okay, so Python, let's do pip 3 install YAML. Or maybe is YAML. All right, let's do which Python 3. Oh, user bin Python 3. Okay, that's. Oh, I didn't have the command line. Wait, okay, so what happened here? So this thing, SQLite, Python. I didn't have this, but then it made a bunch of stuff. Brew link did not complete because it couldn't. Yeah, I think I'm not getting this working right now. Maybe. Okay, but I think I think this highlights sort of the brittleness of Python installs because clearly I have sort of a Franken install going on right now, and debugging Python paths is never fun. But I really like the stuff that Brendan's doing. And it's going to be interesting to see where it goes from there. Okay, so PyYAML, you think that's what we want to do? It's busy installing this other stuff, the command line tools. Oh, we're like 5 minutes. All right, yeah, I'm gonna pass on this. I think y'all get the flavor of it. There's not much to it. This is why I felt like I could do a twofer because it's really pretty simple. It's very much I think, a proof of concept here. The interesting thing here is that he does build out sort of this YAML object model, and this is something that to me is interesting. And I think maybe part of that is the expression. Okay, this is fascinating. Is that print unrendered bits, you have YAML variables and stuff. So we had to do some hackorama around that to actually make the sort of re-embedding work. The and it was clear it was his like over the Christmas project. The let's see. So he's using dumper node representer. Okay, so the YAML library for Python. So PyYAML, okay, so it's PyYAML, and then can you, okay, from YAML, okay. This is the other thing that confuses me is that the package name and the pip install is like different. Like, don't do that. Um, when this loads, it does a loader and it loads it into sort of raw types by default, and then you can actually overload sort of the different types that you want to think. But there's no sort of generic sort of YAML object model similar to like when you're say parsing XML back in the day. And so it's interesting that he has to do a little bit of that to be able to make this stuff work. So, all right, cool. And he does like a recursive descent to render the thing, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I think I am going to call it there. So let me know what you think about this, like doing smaller projects like this, trying to hit multiple of them. If that's something that you all enjoy, definitely let me know. I think it's fun for me to do a little bit of lightning round on this stuff. Uh, both of these projects I think are really interesting. Definitely Co has more miles on it, and it's really about that sort of turning the crank around, making this stuff be a tighter inner loop for devs. But it's very much focused at Go and the Go build process, that type of thing, versus something super generic. Um, we've already seen that with stuff like Jib, you can do similar types of things with Java, but I don't think that we see a absolutely generic solution here. Um, Similarly, I think we've seen a gazillion and one projects around templating YAML, and there's always this duality between do I want this to feel like plain old data for simple use cases, or do I want people to be able to page in an entire programming language for more complex use cases? Uh, I'm still hoping that we can find something that does a good job of splitting the difference for both of these things. And I think when we look at something like Q, and maybe even JSON to some point of view, they start looking like YAML, but they or turn into a fully fledged language by the time you're done, um, or they start looking like plain old data. Um, Whereas I think there's definitely a class of solutions and a way of thinking of let's rip the band-aid off, just use a real programming language from the get-go. And I definitely know that Brendan fits in that camp, and so we definitely disagree on this stuff here. But it's interesting to see sort of how you actually bring sort of that different point of view here. And I love the influence from the React world with JSX. I think that that's really cool. All right, so finally, if you made it this long, you're probably already subscribed, but I'm on YouTube, so I got to say subscribe and hit the bell button and all that. And then Matt has says that there's a code channel in the Knative Slack, so if you want to actually go deeper on that with them, find more ways to actually use it. They are you take any one of those people and you corner them, and they'll start talking your ear off about how awesome Co is and how much they love it. So I couldn't avoid doing a TGIK on it. But with that, I'm going to sign off, and I'm going to wish you all a great weekend. I hope if you're in a different time zone, you're already enjoying your weekend. If not, have a great rest of your Friday, and we'll see you all next time here on TGI Kubernetes. Thank you.